Knowledge and humility, how do those two go together? Well, this philosophy says that as you gain knowledge, an inevitable byproduct is humility, which is interesting because a lot of times you find some pretty egotistical individuals that gain knowledge or mastery in a field and they gain even more ego. But this philosophy, this discipline is all about elimination of the ego, control and mastery over your ego. So this bit of knowledge, this philosophical, timeless tradition of Vedanta is a unique set of principles and concepts that actually comes with a healthy byproduct of humility, which I'll touch on the value of that in a second. It's not just something that goes on, the back of a bumper sticker. It's that we say is a great value to embody humility, but we don't really know why. This philosophy is very specific on why. But as knowledge grows, so does humility. This, in some ways, is a continuation of the last episode that talked about how ignorance is the wellspring of agitation. When we get agitated in life, it is rooted in ignorance of a scenario, of ourselves, what we do to other people, what patterns of behavior we just continually perform, and blows up in our face, and we keep thinking it's other people, and it's really just ignorance of ourselves. Well, similarly, as ignorance and agitation go together, so does knowledge and humility. When there is a cultivation of knowledge of the self, of the higher, of something like this philosophy within Vedanta, what happens is you not only hear these knowledge bombs that you can't unhear. It's not like physics where you hear a law in physics and you're like, okay, I guess I just have to accept that because something falling at 32 feet per second is not necessarily, it doesn't map to our experience, let's say. But when someone tells you wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning, many of us are like, oh, damn. That would be an embodiment of wisdom if you could see what's going to happen in different decisions in life, different forks in the road. Or I remember when I first heard, attach you lose, detach you gain. And when we're attached to a certain outcome or a relationship, that it actually pushes that thing away instead of a healthy detachment where you're like, hey, if this dating relationship is supposed to work out, it'll work out. Boom, it creates the conditions in which that other person can't get enough of you. You're attached to them, texting them 27 times a day, you will push them away. And when I heard that, attach you lose, detach you gain, from startup life to relationships, I was like, damn, that maps to my experience. And as our knowledge grows within this philosophy, and one of those knowledge bombs is from, I think, 2 episodes ago of philosophy is clarity. It's like, wow, as our knowledge grows, as our clarity grows, so does humility. And what does that narrative arc look like? Well, as your knowledge of the self, of the higher, grows, as our clarity grows, you do see the shallowness of the world around us. That is, it's inevitable. You see people, close friends, family members perhaps, stressing out over certain things that you're like, that just doesn't really matter. Like, that's not gonna, even if they get that thing, not only are the attachments not creating the conditions for them to improve their odds of getting that thing, but also it's not going to be that great. Or you're like, oh, I would not take that job just because it pays more in the beginning, when you know that person is not wired for that job, that it's not going to end very well. You see the end in the beginning for them. It's built-in objectivity, by the way, when we give people advice. It's so easy to lend them some clarity, whether they take it or not, because it's not a personalized problem. You're not in it. So it is actually really helpful to ask people for advice to get that built-in objectivity that you or I might not have in a certain situation in life. But as you start to see that shallowness, there's a chance of judgment to grow. And in fact, judgment can grow, where you wish that person, because you wish well for them, you judge them for, why do they make that decision? Oh God, why did they get that tattoo? Oh no, why would they do that and ruin the marriage? There is this interim step of judgment where you have this growing knowledge and this growing humility of, man, maybe I don't know everything that I thought I knew. Maybe wisdom really does begin in wonder. As Socrates said, it begins in, I don't know all these things that I claim to know before. And that knowledge leads to that wonder, leads to discovering things because of that wonder being there, that like, wow, kind of want to eat wonder for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I want to approach every scenario with, I don't know. And there can be this at the same time of that personal humility growing, this view of judgment, of wishing that everybody would take perhaps to a more philosophical path in life, wishing that everybody would see things as clearly as you might. And that is natural. But that interim step of judgment is ultimately unhealthy and unhelpful, because judgment, and as you pursue the knowledge more, not only does that inner humility also turn into outer humility when it comes to seeing that shallowness. You see that shallowness. You see the shallowness as plain as day, like you would see in a shallow pool or a shallow tide. The shallowness exists. But over time, there's no judgment for the person and that friend or that family member that's approaching things some shallow way, that TV show, a commercial that just doesn't have any teeth for you because it's so shallow. The Instagram accounts that no longer have influence over you because you're like, God, I don't even want those things that person is flaunting. That shallowness remains, but the judgment doesn't. And that's because as you continue on the path of knowledge, you go from that inner humility to that outer humility of saying to yourself, man, I'm still that way. I might not be influenced by the things that they're flaunting, but I'm still just as ignorant around X, Y, or Z areas in my life. I'm still just as attached to certain things. It might not be the lower things you were attached to. You know, as a 10-year-old outgrows certain toys and figurines and gets attached to friends or social circles. Still attachment. It's just a higher-minded attachment than perhaps the lower. And there's this growing recognition and identification instead of judgment with the other people that are attached to certain things that you might not be attached to. But man, can you really see, wow, this person in my life that's really beating me over the head with this religious tradition. Maybe I'm doing that with philosophy. Maybe I'm pushing it. Knowledge is taken, it is not given. You'll only repel people away by trying to give it to people. Drop breadcrumbs for sure, but let them come to you to take it. Pushing it on people can be one of the most destructive things that we can do for others, because then maybe it puts them off the scent for 10 years instead of just living a life that is so exemplary that metaphorically they're coming, chasing you down to try to figure out what you're doing that's leading to that. Listening to each word with undivided attention because they value your opinion so much and your insight so much, versus you push something on them 5 times in a row and for years they're like, I'm not going to ask so-and-so about that because God's too much of an agenda. So instead of judging others, you start to recognize, oh, that's me. Or that was me 5 years ago. Oh, that's where I was 10 years ago, and it's just going to be a 10-year journey. to see perhaps the clarity that I might have on this or that situation in life that they don't have, but there is no judgment that they don't have that clarity. Yo-Yo Ma, the amazing musician, said it takes 3 generations to produce a world-class musician. I thought it was so fascinating when he said that. We all want the quick fixes, to the point where I've never heard anyone say a world-class endeavor requires 3 generations of pursuit and sacrifice. Like the longest you hear in the West is like 10 years overnight. If you put in 10 years, that overnight success was 10 years in the making. That's like the longest you hear in the West. I've never heard anything like 3 generations, but damn if that is probably not right. Okay, that sounded weird. Damn if that is probably not, but damn if that is probably right. I don't know how that sentence should go, but what I'm basically saying is, damn, that Yo-Yo Ma, probably right. For you to have, let's say, financial cushion or sound financial decisions, that might be stemming from a generation before of great guides. Maybe 2 generations before of I know in our family, a great grandfather coming over to this country at 16 years old, leaving Syria at 16 years old. That's 4 generations to provide a much different outcome in where we are in Los Angeles to by way of the East Coast, and then Oklahoma, then Texas, and now California, versus where the rest of our extended family still is in Lebanon and Syria. I heard a friend say that if it weren't for the conflicts in the Ukraine or in Gaza, that the number one humanitarian crisis that no one even knows about is double-digit inflation in Lebanon and Syria, where just these entire economies are completely is basically entering nuclear winter of their economies. Beirut, a city that was once flourishing decades ago, now in economic ruins, and a family a few generations apart in Los Angeles by the beach. So maybe Yo-Yo Ma is right. Multiple generations. So you see somebody that didn't have great guides. There's no judgment for their decisions. It's appreciation in your own scenario, perhaps, but even more helpful is identification of, damn. It's my favorite comedian, Pete Holmes, often says in his podcast, if I were them, I'd be them. Such a healthy perspective. If I were them, I'd be them. If I didn't have the guides that I've got, that I had growing up, I'd probably be just like them. It's so helpful to use with a parent. A parent that you're like, why don't they see things the way that I see them? Why do they always pushing their views on me? And if you were that mom or dad or that mother-in-law, that father-in-law, you'd be them too. So as knowledge grows, as awareness grows, so does identification, and so does humility. What a beautiful tandem of knowledge and humility, of awareness, clarity. What a beautiful progression in life to invest in an area of life that not only applies to all other areas, from parenting to business, to friends, to family, to even this philosophy's take on working out and keeping your limbs firm. It applies to every aspect of life, but it also comes with not just a mastery and knowledge of oneself, but it comes with humility and awareness and identification with those around us. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.